Hi.
I feel like I can't do my normal peppy intro. I feel like I have to be like, hello guys, welcome back to my channel. If you're brand new here, my name is Nikki, and this is my book nook. Okay, hi guys. You might be able to tell by the title of this video, by my different little get up today, that we are doing something a little bit different, a little bit fun, and I am super excited about it. I, just like pretty much the rest of the world, watched the new show Wednesday on Netflix and absolutely loved it. I haven't been able to stop thinking about it. The freaking song, the dancing song, both the TikTok version and the actual version, have just been permanently stuck in my head over the last week. And as I was watching the show, you know, if you've watched it, I assume you've watched it if you're watching this video, Wednesday is such an interesting character. You know, she's very different. She totally stands out from the crowd and has absolutely no interest of blending in with the crowd. She's very like old-timey and sort of like classic in a way. She has no like interest in participating in like these modern day like teenage, you know, structures and things like social media, and just like she's very to herself. She's very just like her own person, and she's very much okay with that, and I honestly love her. I just think that Jenna Ortega absolutely killed it. She played her role so perfectly and just made all of us fall in love with Wednesday, even though like you're not supposed to fall in love with her, right? She's supposed to be this total like standoffish, quiet, like cold girl, but like you can't not love her. And I was especially attracted to Wednesday in this show because like I love the whole element of her being a writer and like writing a novel throughout the show. She's very like passionate about what she does. Like she's very like goal focused, and even though she might come off as like selfish and cold and like she doesn't care about anyone else, obviously throughout this entire show, like all she's trying to do is save the day and like keep everybody safe. Like I just thought she was such an interesting character, and I, you know, being me, I couldn't help but just like get the gears turning as I was watching the show. You know, she mentions a few different like books and like works of literature and authors and stuff throughout the show, but I couldn't help but sit there and think like, okay, if Wednesday Addams was a girl that was like on book talk, on like modern day social media book content world, what are the books that she would like? Like obviously she's probably more of like a Mary Shelley, Emily Bronte, Edgar Allan Poe kind of girl, but like just hear me out. If we exposed her to book talk, it's like what books would she enjoy? And right away I thought of a handful of different books, so like I just want to talk about those with you guys today. Like this is kind of like a recommendation video, but also just like books that I love, that I feel fit Wednesday Addams and her personality and the type of person she is, and just like the story of the show in very specific ways. Like I have so many reasons for each of these books, so I just wanted to talk through them with you guys today. I thought it would be fun, so let's just get into it. So to me, the first and most obvious book that just stood out to me that reminded me of Wednesday, and honestly this entire show, was The Outsiders by S.E. Hinton. This was my absolute favorite book that I read in school growing up. If you haven't read this yet, it's like 165 pages. Seriously, do yourself a favor and pick it up. But basically, if you don't know the story of it, this book actually was written and takes place in the 1960s, and it follows this boy named Ponyboy Curtis, and he lives alone with his two older brothers. His parents passed away when he was a kid, and they live in this very small town that is very much divided and separated by two groups of people. They have the Greasers, which is the group that he's a part of. Really, it's like the poor, sort of like low class, working class sort of people. You know, they grease their hair. They're looked at as very like different and just looked down upon by the rest of the town. So we have the Greasers, and then we have the Socias, which is short for socials. They're basically just like the rich upper class people. Think of it kind of like if you've seen Outer Banks, it's like the Pogues and the Kooks. Like that is kind of like the separation of this group. And so to me, it reminded me so much of Wednesday because they obviously have, you know, the town of Jericho, which is like the town that this story is set in. It's sort of all the like normal people. And then you have Nevermore Academy, which is in Jericho, or like right outside of Jericho. And the Jericho people all look at the Nevermore kids and just think that they're total like outcasts and weirdos and losers and pick on them, bully them, look down on them. And that is very much what happens in The Outsiders. Like Ponyboy and his friend group, his brothers, like they go through so much. Like the Socias literally like attack them, pick on them, like do horrible things to them so much in the same way that it happens in Wednesday. And basically like in this story, like this entire thing comes to a head and something goes wrong one night between these two groups, a fight turns into a little bit more, and then Ponyboy and his best friend Johnny are kind of like on the run. It is like totally like a story that goes a million miles an hour. It's at the end of the day though, just like about friendship and family and what the difference is really between all of us and how, you know, society structures affect us and how it's so stupid at the end of the day, and like to focus on what really matters. Like there's so much packed in this really short little story, but I absolutely love this book so much. Like I adore it. And the movie is so good as well. So if you've never experienced this and you like the vibe of Wednesday, you like the whole like outcast, lower class versus the like upper class, like bullies, like fighting, battling, if you're into that, you will love The Outsiders. And I think that Wednesday would really love it as well. Okay, so the next book that really just reminded me of Wednesday Addams, and when I say it, you might be like, okay, sister, what? Just hear me out. Punk 57 by Penelope Douglas. I know Penelope Douglas is known for her spicy stories, and don't get me wrong, this book is very spicy, but the message at its core and what really happens in it reminds me a lot of like multiple themes throughout Wednesday, so just hear me out. Basically, this story follows this boy named Misha and this girl named Ryan. The two of them were paired up with each other whenever they were in elementary school to be pen pals with one another. They went to different schools and it was like this pen pal program, and Misha and Ryan both have kind of like unisex names, and their teachers accidentally paired them up, not realizing that Misha was a guy and that Ryan was a girl. And even though they weren't supposed to be paired up, they ended up staying together as pen pals, and they ended up like taking this pen pal thing to the next level. They literally have written letters back and forth to each other for years, even though they only live like one town apart, literally from elementary school up until now high school. They still send each other handwritten letters, but they have never met before. They've never seen each other before, and they have formed like the closest of bonds, like the closest of friendships. And basically what happens at the start of the story is Misha and Ryan are now like going into their senior year of high school, and Misha basically ends up accidentally finding Ryan, finding out who she is. He encounters her in real life. She doesn't realize that he is who he is, but he puts two and two together that this is Ryan, this is my Ryan, this is my best friend through all these years. Honestly, this girl that I have like fallen in love with throughout this time, writing back and forth together. And when he realizes who she is, he's pretty much heartbroken, because it turns out that even though him and Ryan have bonded all these years over feeling like they are, again, sort of like outcasts, like they don't fit in at school, like they don't have a place where they belong, like they just don't get it, like they don't get like what all these kids are doing, the popular group, like they just think all of it is so stupid, and that's something they've really bonded over. But now when Misha actually meets Ryan in real life, it turns out that she is that high school bully that they have always like hated, because obviously it comes from like a point of like being insecure and like not feeling like she fits in, and this is how she chooses to deal with that, by kind of becoming this bully that she has hated this entire time. And so when Misha discovers this, he is like totally distraught, heartbroken, but more than anything, he's pissed. Like he is so mad. So he basically forms this plan that he is going to transfer to her high school under a different name, and he is going to put Ryan in her place. He's going to sort of like seek his revenge on her for making him think that he was talking to someone different and like not being who she really is, and also just like trying to get her back to who she really is and realize that the way she's acting is not okay and like not who she wants to be. There's a lot to it. But this story really reminds me of Wednesday, because even though Wednesday, again, is this very like cold-hearted, on the surface, cold-hearted sort of person, the one thing that she does not put up with is bullies. Like at the very beginning of the story, the whole reason she ends up going to Nevermore Academy is because she's expelled from her high school because these boys were bullying her brother, and she was not okay with it. Like these jocks, these popular kids, she literally like unleashed terror and hell on them because they were picking on this little kid. And so we see that throughout the story. Like she is not okay with bullies. She is always there to stick up for the little man. And I freaking love her for it. And that is very much how Misha is in this story. Like he does not let Ryan get away with being a bully. He puts her in her place for that. And Ryan as well, like you get to see, you know, throughout the story that, like I said, it's really from a point of insecurity, and it's just, high school's rough, life is rough. It doesn't give you an excuse to be a crappy person, but yeah, like that just, aspect of the story reminds me a lot of Wednesday as a person, and I think that she would really love the message that would come from this story. And also it's just like a really freaking good, suspenseful, spicy book with like a fantastic ending. Everything just wraps up in a bow. It's very much like a soulmate, like friends to enemies to lovers. Oh, so good. So good. And also just the aesthetic, this little like punk 57 like gothic vibe. Like Wednesday would be all over this, let's be honest. Okay, the next book I want to talk about that reminded me of Wednesday was The Sundown Motel by Simone St. James. This is such a good book, such an interesting book. It takes place in two different timelines. The first one takes place in 1982 and follows this woman named Vivian. Vivian is just a very like free-spirited girl. She basically decides that she's an adult now. She wants to go off, do her own thing. Her goal is to get to New York City. She just starts driving. She's like, maybe I'll be an actress. I don't know. She ends up not making there because she stops at this really small town called Fell in New York State. And she ends up stopping at this motel on the side of the road just to stay the night, just for one night. But once she gets there, she ends up learning that this motel is in need of a night clerk, in need of someone to sit at the desk at night during the graveyard shift and just like be there in case anybody happens to walk in or call or needs a room, whatever. And since Vivian doesn't really have any sort of like plan in life, she kind of likes this little small town. She likes this motel. She's like, you know what? I'm gonna take this position and I'll just like stay here for a few months, see what happens. Like, you know, I'm just vibing. And so Vivian takes this position. She's working at this motel every night by herself throughout the night, and very quickly realizes that things are not quite what they seem. Like things are not quite right in this hotel, in this town. Like she experiences some very crazy, creepy, paranormally type of things in this hotel. Honestly had me on the edge of my seat. Like this book like scared me at times, like gave me nightmares almost, but like in the best possible way, of course. So basically, yeah, we have Vivian's story going on. That's sort of the first focus of this book, where the second focus is present day on this girl named Carrie. And Carrie has basically just gone through a tragedy. Her mother has passed away from cancer, and Carrie just needs to like get away from it all for a while. There is this one thing that has always kind of like plagued her, this thing that's just always been in the back of her mind that she hasn't been able to let go, and her mother was the only person in her life that could have ever possibly given her the answers to this sort of like predicament that has always haunted her. So now she's going to take it into her own hands. Basically, my roundabout way of saying this is Carrie is going to travel to Fell, New York to visit the Sundown Motel so that she can find out what the heck happened to her Aunt Vivian back in the 80s, because all anybody knows is one night Vivian went in for her shift just like normal, and she was never seen or heard from again. Literally just up and vanished, disappeared, no trace of her. And this is obviously Carrie's aunt. It is her mom's sister, and they were not close with one another. So she doesn't have any information. She doesn't know what happened to her, and she's determined now to go to this motel, sort of like retrace Vivian's steps. She's gonna go there and actually work there in the same position that Vivian was in as the night clerk, experience all these things for herself, and try to put together the pieces of what happened to Vivian. And I freaking love this story because the book like flashed back and forth between these two timelines. So like you're seeing Vivian's story, you're seeing her like go to this motel, experience all these things for the first time, and then you're at the same time like seeing Carrie now present day, like 35 years later, like also experience the same things, trying to like figure out what happened. Like it just reminded me a lot of Wednesday, because at the end of the day, like Wednesday, the show, is like a mystery. Like she's literally like Sherlock Holmes at this Nevermore Academy trying to figure out what the heck is going on, what is afoot, what evil forces are here to like destroy this place. And Carrie very much reminded me of Wednesday. Like she is like ruthless, like nothing's gonna stop her from figuring out what happened to her Aunt Vivian, and for like bringing to justice whatever or whoever is responsible for this. And honestly, it also was just like creepy and spooky and just totally something that I think Wednesday would find great joy in. And also I just want like any excuse I can to talk about this book, because seriously, like one of the best thrillers I've read in such a long time. It's like so different. It's a thriller, but it's also a mystery. Like I love the two settings. Anything set in the 80s, like sign me the heck up. So good. And I think Wednesday would agree. Okay, so this next book to me is like so Wednesday through and through. It is Looking for Alaska by John Green. I am like John Green's biggest stan, so I obviously like want to use any excuse I can to talk about John Green or his books, but seriously, this book and the girl in this book to me is just like the most modern day possible like realistic version of Wednesday that you could possibly get. Basically, this story follows this boy named Miles right as he is transferring to this boarding school in Alabama to, you know, finish out the rest of his high school. Miles is a character that, you know, really is just after my own heart. I feel like every main character in John Green's stories, like in some way or another, just like lives in a part of my brain where I'm just like, yes, makes me feel so seen. Miles is very obsessed with people's famous last words, and he always just feels like there's like a greater purpose, like something that he wants to achieve. He wants to go and seek the great perhaps is what he calls it. Like basically like whatever there is to do in life, whatever there is to achieve and have, like he wants to experience that before he gets to his final last words. It's just very, it's very John Green, but I eat it up. So Miles is going to this school and he, you know, meets a lot of different personalities right upon getting to this school. Like there's just a very like clear separation of people there. Like once again, kind of like some of these other books I've talked about. There are the people that go to this school that go home every weekend. They're really like the rich kids that, you know, they come to school just for school, but then they go and stay at home with their parents, like in their fancy houses on the weekends. And then there's the other kids like Miles that really do like get shipped off to the school and stay there 24/7. Like they're there even over Christmas half the time. Like they, you know, are lower class, kind of the outcasts. It's just a very clear divide between the two. And so Miles is obviously in that sort of like outcast group and meets a lot of other outcasts right away that he really like forms a bond with, that he forms a great friendship with. And you know, he really likes a lot of those friends, but the person that he meets right off the bat that just like completely shatters his world, blows his mind, is this girl named Alaska. Alaska is pretty much so much like Wednesday. Like she is just very much this girl that is like, she's not down with Miles' this whole like look on life, the whole like seeking the great perhaps, whatever, like all these amazing things are supposed to happen, I'm supposed to achieve these things. Like, you know, she's very much like life sucks and then you die. Like, you know, live day by day, live in the moment, drink the beer, smoke the cigarette, like we all die in the end, like who cares? And you know, that might sound very like cold and depressing and whatever, but Miles is so enamored by her. Like he just thinks she's so fascinating. Like she is just so like charismatic and the most like, you know, sort of like dry, negative way. Like she's just such an interesting character. And so he pretty much gets wrapped up in the world that is Alaska, and a whole lot of things happen throughout this story. It is very much kind of like a coming of age story, and there's like a big plot twist if you haven't read it. So I don't want to say any more about it, but like very much so, like I look at Alaska as like the Wednesday of this boarding school, which is another thing because like Wednesday is also set at a boarding school in Nevermore, and this is at the Culver Creek boarding school in Alabama. So like it's very much, I almost look at this story as like POV Tyler goes to Nevermore and Wednesday is already a student there and he like meets her. You know, like if you look at it that way, I feel like that's kind of how the story would go. It's just so good, and I think Wednesday would totally think that Alaska was like the coolest book character ever and would just like be obsessed with her. So definitely check it out. Okay, this next book to me is like, if Wednesday just was feeling a little crazy, if she was just in like a silly, goofy mood and she wanted to dip her toe in the world of rom-coms, tell me she would not read this book. The Dead Romantics by Ashley Poston. Like this is literally Wednesday. It is Wednesday through and through. This story follows this girl named Florence that is actually a writer, much like Wednesday herself. She has worked as a writer her entire life. She's really tried to build this career, but she's never really found success on her own. But the way that she has found success in the world of writing is by actually being a ghostwriter. So she used to live in a small town growing up, but now lives in New York City, and she works as a ghostwriter for basically the most like prolific romance author in this world. You know, she writes under her name, but she does all of her writing because now she's like in her old age. She wants to continue selling books, but she just like doesn't have it in her to write. So Florence has been doing this for a long time and she's been really good at it, but recently, like, she just can't find it in her to write anymore. She went through a really rough breakup over the last year, and she's just in a place where, like, she doesn't believe in love. She doesn't think it exists. She thinks it's all, like, fake, and that, you know, there's no such thing as true love. So she finds it very difficult to write romance. And, like, she is approaching this deadline for her author, and she needs to get it done, but, like, she is having the hardest possible time. So she basically goes to New York to meet with her new editor to basically beg for an extension on this deadline. But he, right away when she meets him, is, like, very grumpy, is, like, very attractive, of course, but very grumpy, not having it. The deadline is the deadline. It's got to be done. So she is now in this, like, difficult place of she has to meet this deadline, and everything seems to be going wrong in the world. But it just gets even worse because she gets a call from back home and learns that her father has just suddenly passed away. So now Florence has to travel back to her small town that she grew up in, where she was very much bullied and picked on. Like, she ran away from the small town for a reason, because her family is known in this town for owning the funeral home. Like, she was always picked on growing up. If I remember correctly, I almost want to say, am I just making this up? Am I projecting? I feel like people called her Wednesday. Like, I think people picked on her and made fun of her and, like, called her Wednesday because, like, her family owned, like, this funeral home, and, like, it just, you know, kids are stupid. But yeah, she obviously was picked on for that already, but also it made things so much worse when this rumor got around that is very much true to reality, that Florence actually talks to ghosts. She can talk to ghosts, she can communicate with ghosts. This is something that she has dealt with her entire life. It's something that her and her father shared. Ghosts appear to her, communicate with her, often because they have unfinished business. So she is a ghost writer. She can speak to ghosts. Such an interesting concept that every single day I'm like, how did I not think of this first? Ashley, you were such a genius. Like, I just love it. But yeah, her life is turned upside down. She is at home to, you know, put together her father's funeral, still trying to write this novel that she physically cannot write. And all of this gets so much worse when a brand new ghost appears to her, and it just so happens to be the ghost of her grumpy editor that she literally just met like 5 minutes ago, and is now apparently dead. And she has to figure out why the heck he's appeared to her and what she has to do to help him. There's just a lot to this story, and it is so freaking good. Like, it's got those, like, spooky, kind of, like, creepy, paranormal-y aspects to it, obviously. Like, based on what I told you, half the story is set, like, in a funeral home. There's ghosts involved. Like, it's just very Wednesday. And then the whole element of, like, Florence being a writer, like, to me, like, as soon as I was, like, thinking of this video idea, I was like, oh my god, The Dead Romantics, obviously, is a book that Wednesday would vibe with. It's so good. Seriously, this is one of my favorite books I read all year. If you haven't read it yet, 100% recommend it. Okay, and then the last book that just reminded me of Wednesday that I think she would really connect with, and that I really connect with. I freaking love this book so much, and I'm never gonna stop talking about it. It is Carrie Soto is Back by Taylor Jenkins Reid. This story follows this girl named Carrie Soto. She basically in this story is the greatest tennis player that ever lived. Like, she was coached by her dad from a very young age. It was ingrained in her that she was going to be the greatest ever. She put her entire heart, soul, life, every single minute of every day into tennis from the time she was a kid. Never focused on friendships, relationships, literally anything else. It's always just been her and tennis, and her dad helping her with tennis. And because of that, Carrie became a very, like, closed off person. She really has had no friends, no real relationships. Like, she's just turned very cold because it's what she needed to do to be the greatest ever. And, like, she is okay with that, and she's accepted that, and she is who she is, and she has gone on to achieve, like, more, you know, goals and awards and recognitions than any other tennis player in the world. Like, she's won like 20 Grand Slams by the end of her career, and now present day in this story when we start it, she is now 37 years old. She's been retired for 5 years, and she is sitting at a tennis match watching this girl named Nikki Chan basically tying her record. If she wins this match, she is tying Carrie's record, and Carrie is no longer the greatest that ever lived, like, by herself. Now Nikki is also sitting at that same level as her. And so she's sitting there with her father watching this match and is like, it's fine, you know, she's not gonna win, she's not gonna win. He's like, what if she does win? What does that mean? She's like, well, she's not, so it doesn't matter. Nikki obviously wins. So now Carrie is faced with this fact that this thing that she's worked for her entire life is no longer entirely hers, and she has to ask herself, what am I gonna do about it? So Carrie decides to come out of retirement at 37 years old to start training again and to compete and to basically regain her record and have it by herself and remain the best tennis player that ever lived. So we basically see this story like start at Carrie being a child, like her very young age. We see her father like training her from the very beginning, and then see her go on to gain fame, become the best ever, see her win all of these competitions. And then we now get to see her present day, you know, starting to train once again, competing once again, trying to get her title back. So it is this whole journey, and we just get to learn so much about Carrie and the person she is. Like, you know, we get to learn about her personally, but we also get to learn how like the public sees her. You know, like everybody just sees her as like a complete stone cold bitch, like heartless, ruthless, like no friends, never been married, whatever. Like there's so much that people have to say about her from the outside that don't personally know her. And Carrie is aware of that. Like she knows that she is not liked, and she doesn't care. Like nobody around her matters to her. It is all about her and, you know, satisfying herself and being proud of herself. And that is like all she ever needs. But also in reality, like she never feels like she's good enough. Like that's just like the kind of person she is. And oh my God, I adored this book. Like this might be my absolute favorite book I've read all year. Like I just simply haven't stopped talking about it. Like just seeing what Carrie goes through, seeing her like deep passion and like how she almost doesn't know who she is when she doesn't have this passion and this thing that she's obsessing over. And like how, you know, no matter what anybody tells her, like she just has blinders on and she's just laser focused on her goals. Like I just feel like I relate to her in a lot of ways. And I think this story is so beautiful to like remind you that, you know, you might see something from the outside, but that doesn't mean you really know who people are. Like don't judge a book by its cover. Like there's just so many amazing life lessons to this story. And I just think that Carrie Soto is someone that Wednesday would totally vibe with, relate to. Like, you know, Wednesday, like we've talked about so much, just comes off as like a total stone cold bitch, and like she doesn't care about anyone, doesn't care about anything. Like we see this friendship between Wednesday and Enid. Like whenever they first, you know, start to room together, Wednesday's very anti like being around anybody, being around any type of, you know, other girls, having any friends. Like she doesn't care about that. That's not her focus. Like she's just here to write her book and do her thing. Like she doesn't have time for any of that. But we see like this growth in Wednesday over time, and see like how she realizes it's not the worst thing in the world to have some friends around you and people that care about you and people that you care about. And that's something that you also like experience in this book. But at the end of the day, like Wednesday is who she is, and she's not going to completely change, and like she's going to still want to achieve her goals and write her book and all of that, and nobody's going to stop her. And you know, nobody's going to stop Carrie either. Like I just think that they are like two peas in a pod in a lot of ways. And I think that Wednesday would totally vibe with this book, and then also like come out of it like seeing the growth and be like, wow, like I think it would really speak to her. Like I think Carrie's story and her like story arc very much kind of follows like Wednesday's character arc throughout Wednesday as well. I think that is enough rambling from me today, guys. I hope you enjoyed this fun, different little video. Seriously, so many of these books I talked about are like my absolute favorite books. So if you haven't read any of them, I highly recommend them, whether you know, like Wednesday or care if Wednesday would like them or not. They're just good freaking books. If you guys have any other books that you think Wednesday would like, leave them in the comments. Like, let's keep a whole thread going. This is super fun. If you guys liked this video and you'd like to see other videos like this, if you have any suggestions or things you would like to see, also leave them in the comments. Send me a message on Instagram. My DMs are always open. But yeah, guys, I think that is it for me today. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll talk to you very soon. I need to take these braids out. They're hurting my head. Okay. Bye.